Hello, PR Maven Nation. Welcome to the PR Maven Podcast, episode 102, presented by Marshall Communications, creator of the Marshall Plan 65-Step Strategic Process. Today's guest is Derek O'Sullivan, who is CEO of Crua Outdoors. Crua Outdoors is a client of Marshall Communications, and we have been honored to work with Derek and his team. Derek believes passionately that tents don't have to be uncomfortable, so he has done something about it. Crua has developed the world's first correctly, thermally, acoustically, and light insulated tent or tenting system, and now supplies a range of insulated tents and shelters for both recreational and industrial use. Derek developed the first Thermo Tent in 2014, and with the help of Enterprise Ireland, he has since developed, tested, and patented a range of products. Crua's Thermo Tents were launched to the market through a successful Kickstarter campaign in May of 2015 and have gone from strength to strength ever since. It is my pleasure today to chat with Derek O'Sullivan of Crua Outdoors. Welcome to the PR Maven Podcast, a podcast all about growing your network and building your brand through traditional and digital networking techniques. I'm Nancy Marshall, the PR Maven and CEO of Marshall Communications. I've been strengthening brands through PR for over 35 years, and now I'm celebrating the success of executives, influencers, business owners, and entrepreneurs from all around the world, all of whom have cultivated their brands and broadened their networks through traditional and digital networking methods. Each week, I interview one of these interesting and influential individuals and provide an opportunity for you, the PR Maven Nation, to gain insights from their strategies and stories. So stay tuned for this week's episode, and thanks for listening. So, Derek, tell us about your love of camping and the outdoors and how you have built a company out of it.
Well, Nancy, I grew up in the southwest corner of Ireland, in County Kerry here, in a little townland called Derrymore, which is nestled neatly between the Slieve Mountains and the Atlantic Ocean, and it's perfect camping territory, I guess. So I did a lot, and I grew up, for long periods of time in tents in those mountains and on those beaches. So I always had a love of the outdoors. I grew up on a farm as well, so I always kind of had a respect and a love for the outdoors, and kind of that stayed with me throughout my childhood and beyond, really. As always happens, life takes over, and as you become an adult, I suppose, and you spend less time in tents. But at the same time, I tried to engage with the outdoors as much as possible. And when I say life takes over, the story, mortgages and kids and all that kind of stuff. But I did have a problem with traditional tents, what I would call traditional tents, right through that time, and even up to more recently, where I found traditional tents to be quite uncomfortable a lot of the time. They were either too hot or too cold or too noisy or too bright. And I kind of thought to myself, why they don't need to be. You should be able to have a comfortable night's sleep in the outdoors, because the better you're rested in the outdoors, obviously the better experience you're going to have on your trip and your camping trip. And quite often now camping trips are shorter, so you want to make sure you're well rested to make good use of the time you get away. So I started designing, that was kind of, I suppose, around 2015. I started thinking in my own head and designing a tent that would be insulated. So it would be thermally, acoustically, and light insulated. So I designed that. That was our first Crua Lodge and the Crua Tri, that we still actually have in stock. And we kind of went from there. We crowdfunded the first product. We saw that there was, some interest there, and we kind of went from there. And I suppose that's where Crua Outdoors was born, so to speak, called Thermo Tents back those days, but called Crua Outdoors now. and the rest, I suppose, as they say, kind of is history,
Where does the word Crua come from, Derek?
Crua is an Irish word. It's actually a Gaelic word that means hard or tough. So we felt it was a good fit with what we wanted the brand to be. We wanted the brand to stand for being hard, tough, safe, secure, different. So that's kind of where the thought for the using the Gaelic word obviously is in keeping with our heritage and our foundations here in Ireland, and we just felt it was a good fit, and we went with that.
Well, I love that too, because I think people who are accustomed to camping and spending a lot of time in the outdoors are also tough people, and they're resilient people. So I like that concept.
I think you have to be. Sometimes you come across some stuff out there, so I think it definitely helps if you're going to spend a lot of time in the outdoors.
How have you used crowdfunding to build your market, Derek?
Well, crowdfunding has been, at the center of everything we've done really from the start. I mentioned there that we crowdfunded for the launch of our first product and that was on Kickstarter. So the notion of Kickstarter is basically people pre-order the product. So it got us a chance to validate the early tents, and it gave us a chance, I suppose, to make sure somebody was interested in this and people would wanted to buy it. We've gone on from there and we've crowdfunded or launched, I think, 6 other products now through Kickstarter or Indiegogo. It's been great for us because like I mentioned, it validates the idea of the product. You know that you're not trying to build sandcastles in the air. It gives us a chance to make sure that people want to buy it before you actually put it into production. And for the consumer or the user, they tend to be early adapters, and it gives them the chance to get access to the first ones off the production line, as it were, and to influence future designs and future changes in that particular product. So it's been that rewards based crowdfunding, which is essentially a pre-order portal, has been huge for us. We've also engaged in what's called or what's known as equity crowdfunding, where we actually give our community and our customers an opportunity to own part of Crua. So they actually buy into the company, they buy shares in the company or stock in the company. Equity crowdfunding was pioneered really in the UK, and probably most notably by a brewery called Brewdog, a Scottish brewery. But it's becoming more widespread, and I think it's only very much in its infancy. I think it can be a very useful tool for small startups like us to raise equity capital, at the start, as it were, without having to kind of go towards venture capital and that kind of thing. And it gives us a chance to get a really engaged community then as well. When people are pre-ordering products and they get them, or people buy into the company, it's almost a ready-made community. So it gives you a leg up from that perspective. So that's a long-winded way, Nancy, of saying that crowdfunding really has been central to everything we've done, be it people pre-ordering our products or actually buying into the company right from the start.
Well, I'm excited because I'm expecting my Koala 2.0 hammock that I ordered on Indiegogo. So I'm looking forward to receiving that and setting it up by the lake where I go on the weekends. Why don't you tell us about your new product, the Koala 2.0 hammock?
Well, the Koala 2.0 or V2, I think, as we're calling it, is a second version of our initial Crua Koala hammock, which we launched 2 years ago. People loved that hammock. It was our biggest ever crowdfunded launch. But we're always keen to improve it. So we kind of listened to the first batch of customers. There was about 5,000 went out. We listened to our customers' feedback, and we've improved it, and we've improved the design, and we're keen. That's the other thing about it being very very crowdfunded and community oriented, is that we take what our community says quite seriously, and we offer them the opportunity to come back and suggest ways that they can improve products from before they run into the second production run, that kind of thing. So we did in this particular case. And the Koala V2, which is a pretty cool hammock, if I do say so myself. And it's a full kit as well. So you get your bug mesh, your spreader system, which is some spreader bars and guy lines which work together to keep the hammock open. You get quilts and tarp and all that kind of good stuff as well, and an under hammock. So all in all, it's been successful. I think we've got about $418,000 in pre-orders as we're talking right now. So, and there's about a week to go in the campaign. So it's been a really successful launch for us. And we have another launch planned for next month as well. At the end of August, we're hoping to launch the Crua X tent.
Well, I think it's awesome that the hammock has so many amenities. I'm excited about the drink holder, which you can use for your water bottle or perhaps an adult beverage, which I might occasionally enjoy, as well as you have a ditty bag and there's an iPad holder, I think, and a cell phone holder.
Yeah, there's pretty much a pocket for every need, and you can move the pockets. That's one of the improvements in this version. The pockets in the previous version were fixed, whereas these ones can move via Velcro, so you can easily put the pocket where it suits you, because different people have different preferences, and people are different heights, etc. Lay in hammocks differently, so you can pretty much set up the pockets exactly as you want them. And if you want to take that beverage holder you mentioned, you can actually take it away and walk around with it rather than it just being attached to the hammock. So you can use it as your koozie on your next trip. On your next trip, Nancy.
That's just brilliant. I love that, and I could just picture myself walking around with my beverage and looking at my hammock. So. That gets me to product testing. I mean, you guys are the masters of soliciting feedback from customers, and the whole premise of test and learn and improve. So how do you solicit feedback from your customers?
Quite often they'll be quite vocal, and they'll come back and they'll email us, and why don't you do this, and why didn't you do that, and that kind of stuff. And that's great, because there's never the perfect product. The products can always be improved, and we want that kind of feedback. But more often than not, we actually send out surveys after the campaign. So people have gotten the product, and we'll ask them what do they like, what do they dislike, what could we improve on? Is there any kind of functionality we could improve on? Is there anything that didn't live up to expectations? Is there anything that's awkward? Because this is always the first production, right? And the first production run, and that's probably kind of the flip side of crowdfunding. The first production run is always going to be improvable, what I would call improvable, So the crowdfunding community want to be the early adapters, and they want to have an influence on future designs of products and that kind of stuff. So it works well, and they're generally quite good to give their feedback. But sometimes directly, and sometimes comments on the page, can be email, can be Facebook Messenger messages. But we solicit it, as you mentioned, and the most direct way we solicit is through surveys with pointed questions that we want answers on before we go off with another production run.
Well, I think that's a brilliant way to grow your market and your business. And it also engages your customers. And as you said, you've given customers an opportunity to become shareholders and owners. So you really have a tribe of international Crua lovers, so to speak. So I think it's really great that you engage your customers in the process. And that brings me to my next question, which is your market in the United States. When did you start selling in the United States, and how big is your market in the U.S.?
We started pretty much at the start, because when we launched our first products on Kickstarter through crowdfunding, it was that's where we saw the demand. So we put the products on the platform, and that's very much where we saw the demand coming from. Now the Kickstarter community is about 60 to 70% US based anyway, but we very much saw from the early days, I suppose, to answer your question, Nancy, that there is a demand in the US for the kind of products we were developing. So right from the start, I think most of our initial sales would have been in the US. So we now have an office upstate New York, up in the Adirondacks. We have some investors over there. We have, we employ a few people there, and we use, part of the deal when we set up there is we wanted to get engaged in the community there as well. So we obviously, like I mentioned, we employ people there. We rent a premises there. We use the local banks and the local bookkeepers, etc., etc. So we very much see the Adirondacks and Saranac Lake in particular as our North American home, and it's important to us, and it obviously functions as a distribution center as well. So we can ship everything, we can keep everything in the US, and we can ship it a lot more efficiently and quickly from there when we're shipping products. So that's a long-winded way of answering, Nancy, right from the start.
Well, I think it makes a lot of sense because I know that there are a lot of people in the U.S. who really love your product, and they also love the concept of being part of improving, your products and the fact that you listen to their feedback. So we're going to go to a short break, and we'll continue our conversation with Derek in just a moment. But first, I want to tell you about my new book called Grow Your Audience, Grow Your Brand, available now on Amazon.com as a paperback or Kindle edition. And soon you'll be able to purchase the Audible edition, which I read at the Portland Pod, where I am today. The book includes actionable advice on growing a network and growing a brand by taking care of your audience, which is exactly what we're talking about in our conversation today with Derek O'Sullivan from Crua Outdoors. So we'll be back in just a moment with more about Crua Outdoors.
Do you want to grow your client or customer base? Perhaps increase brand awareness? Maybe tell your unique story more effectively? Of course you do. But you may be worried that you don't have enough expertise to make that happen. Well, no worries, PR Maven Nation. Let the PR Maven herself, Nancy Marshall, show you how easy it is to get your message across effectively using a powerful yet simple tool, a message map. Nancy's training is often called informative and constructive, well-designed and impactful, with a perfect blend of theory and real-life experience. You will leverage Nancy's expertise to create your own message map when you register for this comprehensive online video training course, which is broken down into 4 easy-to-understand modules. Normally, this course is priced at $147, but for listeners of the PR Maven Podcast, that's you, PR Maven Nation, it's only $29 when you enter the code word podcast during enrollment. It even includes a workbook and bonus content to guide you through the process. So go to prmaven.com and click on the Message Map Mastery course to enroll today. Remember, enter the word podcast during enrollment for a special discounted price of $29.
Welcome back. And today we're talking with Derek O'Sullivan, CEO of Crua Outdoors, and I want to dive back in with more questions. Derek, you told us a bit about your operation in the Adirondacks of New York, but tell us a little bit more about it.
Yeah, Nancy, it's very much our home in North America. So we have people working with us up there, some fantastic people, and we also distribute out of there. So it's I guess it's kind of our headquarters, for want of a better expression. But it's perfect. It fits perfectly, and it's not actually all that dissimilar to Ireland. When you go into the Adirondacks, it's fairly remote. We're a lot closer to Montreal than Manhattan, even though it's upstate New York. So it's not the easiest place to get to, but well worth the trip. So it fits perfectly in with our brand, with what Crua is about. And of course, they've quite a severe seasonality up there, so it gets nice and warm during the summer and nice and cold during the winter and everything in between. And the autumn and the spring tend to be Irish, what I would call Irish weather, with a mix of everything. So it's it's been great. We're there now a number of years, since 2016 actually, so nearly 4 years. So it certainly feels like home.
Well, of course, it's an area where I've spent a lot of time myself because my sons have been ski racers at Whiteface Mountain, which is there in Lake Placid. And the reason that you and I are working together actually is because of our mutual friend, Adele Connors from Lake Placid. So I'm very grateful to her that she introduced us to each other, and having known that my agency, Marshall Communications, has worked with a lot of companies in the outdoor industry. Adele made the introduction, and that's how we know each other. So I'm grateful to Adele for that.
Yeah, Adele has been a mentor for the business since we first met, actually back in late 2015, I guess, where she's part of the Point Positive investment group who actually invested our initial seed capital into the business. So Adele is invested in every possible way in Crua. So she's been a great voice, and she's been certainly there to point us in the right direction on certain subjects.
Yeah, she's an incredible person and a true friend. So I'm so glad that I met her through the Agency Management Institute that actually we were both part of for many years. So
I second that.
So, Derek, how have you received support from these investors in the Adirondacks for job creation?
Well, we've as I mentioned, Point Positive has invested, so we've received financial support, obviously, in a number of rounds at this stage. They'll get involved sometimes as a side investment in our Cedars rounds. So they've been involved in a number of rounds of investment since the start. But just as importantly, I think they've been involved from from a mentorship point of view. Melinda Little, who is the administrator and kind of runs that whole group, has been fantastic, and I couldn't thank her enough. Really, it's, she's been a huge help to us ever since we first met. And I certainly consider her a mentor and a friend. And there's also two of the Point Positive investors, Kip and Ted, who are now on our board as well. So they're really, I suppose, integral, or they're really integrated into the business right from the foundations up. So they're a hugely important part of our business, and hopefully will remain to be as we move forward and grow.
Well, I commend you for building this worldwide network. And again, the whole premise of the PR Maven podcast is about the importance of building a brand and building a network, both online and in person. And I know that you make trips over to the U.S. to meet with your U.S. investors and your staff and your customers. So you've literally built a tribe of Crua supporters. And how have you gone about doing that? Is it something you knew how to do, or have you figured it out as you went along? How did you know?
Very much figured it out as I went along, kind of taking 3 steps forward and 2 steps back, Nancy, as anybody who tries to start a business will tell you. The most, I suppose, we started. How I met Point Positive actually was interesting, because I went to an investor forum that was on in Manhattan, and so I got a flight. I had to fly to the West Coast for kind of another business meeting, and if I guess we were at that time we were more concentrated on what I would call traditional distribution. Since that, we've morphed very much into an e-commerce company, but at the start we were trying to, I suppose, see would the traditional distribution and brick and mortar way work for us. So I spent a lot of time in the air and eventually learned that wasn't for us. It was probably an expensive way in time and money to learn it, but we learned it eventually. And on the way back from one of those trips, I stopped in Manhattan for an investor forum that was going on there. And we were kind of talking to a few different investors, and a lady contacted me and said, look, this isn't for us or for me per se, but there is this group called Point Positive up in the Adirondacks, and it sounds like the product might be a fit for them and the geography might work, etc. So I said, great. And she made the intro. And the intro was to Melinda, and as I mentioned earlier on, the rest, as they say, is history from that perspective anyway. So it was kind of, that's how we started out. And then, around that time, somebody introduced me as well. A mentor at this side through Enterprise Ireland introduced me to crowdfunding and said maybe this is a good way of getting validation for the product and getting a few sales, on the board, as it were. So I started to learn, and the more I read and learned about crowdfunding, the more I said, yeah, this this definitely looks like it's a good fit for what we're trying to do. Now, we made loads of mistakes since, obviously, but we tried to learn from them and move on. But crowdfunding was one that there have been pioneers of crowdfunding who have done massively well. Brewdog is one in the UK, who have raised a huge amount of equity capital through crowdfunding, and they were one of the pioneers of equity crowdfunding. And then if you look at Kickstarter, a company I really admire is Peak Design, and their last crowdfunding campaign for the tripod last summer raised something like $12 million in pre-orders. For an early stage company. So if you get it right, it can be very right. But we're still learning, very much a work in progress, but hopefully we're getting there. We're improving.
Well, I commend you, because obviously you're passionate and you're persistent and you've got tenacity and grit. And, as someone who has my own business now almost 30 years, I know that it never gets easy. And I think part of it is you do want to continuously improve and raise the bar. And, it's almost a blessing and a curse to be an entrepreneur.
Yes, I agree. There's so many, everybody looks in from the outside and they tell you, it's all great and you're great and you get the pats on the head and the pats on the back and all that kind of stuff, but they don't see the downside of it, which means a lot of late nights, a lot of replying to emails all over the world at all times of the day or night. I remember when our kids were small, because we have a 5-year-old, a 6-year-old, and a 9-year-old, or nearly 9-year-old, and so right when we were starting the business, they were very small, especially the two younger ones. And I remember waking up in the middle of the night, if they'd wake up, and going down to see if they were okay, if they were crying, and bringing my phone with me so that I could reply to emails while I'm trying to get them back off to sleep and that kind of stuff. So I wouldn't recommend that to anybody. I think it's also very important to be able to tune out and to not have the mind going all the time. That's something I'm trying to get better at. It's not easy, but it's you definitely need downtime. And I think that a lot of people I've met, especially if you're trying to launch your own business, that there's a real danger of burnout, and I think that you need to be careful of that as well. And it's hard not to take things personally, and I suppose get anxious about things and all that kind of stuff when you're building a brand and you feel it's very almost an extension of you. But you do need the time to be able to tune out a little bit, and that's where having, I guess, a good team, albeit a small team, a very good team around you, and that's where we're getting to. We certainly have that. We have some great people working in the business now, so that's making it a little bit easier.
And to have a great hammock where you can go and zip yourself up and tune out and relax in nature, or a great tent. So I can so relate to what you're talking about, Derek, because I started my business in 1991 and then had my first child in 92. And that's Craig, who's now turning 28. And I remember when he was 4 or 5, I'd come home from work after being at work all day long, and then I'd be on the phone again in the evening, and I can remember him tugging on my shirt and going, Mama, no more phone.
Yeah.
And it just it's like a stab of a knife in my heart, because I felt like I was neglecting him. But I feel that in the long run, both my boys saw the value of a work ethic, and luckily I feel they learned what a work ethic is, and now they're both hardworking professionals. So it does get better.
Yeah, there's definitely an upside, and hopefully in the long run, like you said, they benefit from knowing that the things don't come for nothing, and hard work is a given. I think certainly if you're starting a business, hard work is just a given. You have to do that. It doesn't actually guarantee anything. But that's the first box you have to tick, is you have to, and I think it can be frustrating sometimes. You look back at a year and you say, look, a lot of that time was spent almost wasted because something didn't work, or a particular thing, notion didn't work, or a particular idea didn't work. But look, you have to go through those to find the ones that do. So it's a hand in glove kind of thing. But balance is certainly something I'm striving for, and I'm getting there, but not since we've started, I think I've gotten worse a little bit recently since we started working from home through COVID and that, it's hard to kind of separate home from work. So we took a step backwards, I think, in the balance thing during COVID, where we seemed to be working a little bit more again. And just before you go to bed, the temptation to turn on the computer and check X, Y, or Z, and there you are 2 hours later, still checking X, Y, or Z. So it's definitely something I need to work on.
Well, I hear you. I think it's a lifelong pursuit. Again, especially if you have that in your DNA, which you and I both have. So, Derek, what is your vision for Crua and the brand as we go into the future and hopefully into a post-COVID-19 world?
Yeah. Growth is very, very front and center, but also we're kind of looking at a few what I would call slight pivots or additions, I guess, slightly different verticals, maybe they would say it in industry. But we're looking at a rentals platform. So first of all, we're going to keep launching new products, and that's a given. But the things we're kind of looking at expanding into that we're already touching on, I guess, but placing a little bit more focus on is we're going to launch a rentals platform where people can rent certain Crua products and certain Crua tents, where we'll ship it actually to them and they can use the product, send it back to us, we'll check it and clean it and all that and send them out again. It's quite a disruptive model, and I think it's something that could prove to be very popular, as people may not want, people are more comfortable with the notion of sharing, everything really now. Certainly pre-COVID, and I think it's going to happen again. You had the rise of Airbnb and Uber, and we know all of the unicorns, amongst many others. So I think that especially with something like an expensive higher end tent, or some of the higher end tents that we sell, people may not want to invest a large amount of money to use it, but they don't want to camp in a crappy tent either. So rental is certainly very much those particular customers or people are going to be very much open to rentals. And obviously we'll be following the proper protocols and steam cleaning before we send them back out and all of that kind of stuff. And another thing we're looking at are events, which obviously we had to cancel this year, but we had planned an event called Wereth Hysteria that was going to go on in Paul Smith's College in the Adirondacks this year. It's going to be a virtual event this year, and proceeds going to the college and some of the college initiatives. But we're very much planning on that next summer, so it's going to be a year later than planned. And then we're also getting very much, even though we're already in the glamping world, we're launching a new glamping product at the back end of this year, which is a kind of a safari style modular tent that'll hang from a wooden, semi-permanent wooden structure. So the glamping is very much, I think, in its infancy in the US in a lot of ways. It's a much more mature market in the EU, in the UK. And I think there's an opportunity there to bring a really good quality product to the market in the US. So we're going to do that, and we're actually, after this call, I have a meeting on it with a new supplier or a potential new supplier. So we're going to get them made in the US as well, and made in the market for the market with the new design. So I think they're the kind of three of the exciting things, along with obviously improving our current products in the recreational world and launching 2 to 3 new products a year.
Well, that's an ambitious vision, and I love the idea of the glamping products. For people who don't know, glamping stands for glamorous camping. And I have to say that's the kind of camping that at my stage in life I like to do, and I could see myself enjoying one of those glamping tents. So I'm looking forward to that.
Yeah, it's an interesting one. I mean, these are very much, they stay in situ for a season or beyond, and they'll have an insulated wall that you can add on the inside, and they have a different type of roof, and it's modular, so you can add different rooms and take away different rooms. So we're excited to launch it, and we're going to launch it in Q4 this year, for delivery in Q1 of 2021, and kind of ready for the spring season 2021. I think a lot of people are anticipating a big outdoors season next season. Hopefully we'll kind of be coming out of COVID by then. There'll there's talks that we should have vaccines, but of course that's a great unknown as well. So, but either way, I think people are planning on a big outdoor season next year, and we want to be ready for it. And I know a lot of glamping operations or hotels where you'll generally see these popping up is people that want to set them up as on private property. So it may be people with a piece of land or a piece of property, or small hotels, big hotels that want to add glamping to their mix. So I think we're anticipating it being positive and popular in 2021. So we want to make sure we have all our development done this year, start our sales and deliver in early next year.
Well, I have a cottage on a lake, and I have these two sons who like to come and bring their friends, and oftentimes they're staying up into the wee hours of the night playing beer pong or something like that. And I would just as soon send them out to a tent, so I can go to bed at a reasonable hour. So I can see having one of these tents set up in the yard and saying, okay, if you want to play beer pong until 3 a.m., go at it, but let me go to bed and sleep in peace. So I will look forward to using that too.
Absolutely. I know where you can, sold. I know where you can get a good one, Nancy. I know where you can get a good one.
Great. So, Derek, is there an app or a book or a website that you have found helpful in growing your business, and why?
I would say there are probably a lot. I mean, our website, our own platform runs off of Shopify. So we use a Shopify platform, and we use their plugins and their apps and that kind of stuff. That run off of that. I wouldn't identify any one particular kind of app or website from an informational point of view. A lot of I tend to do a lot of flicking through LinkedIn and try to make a lot of connections on there. I find that can be quite useful. And I tend to stay fairly well informed when I can, of the news and abreast of market reports and that kind of stuff. But that comes from a wide variety of sources, So I'd be slow to identify one or two in particular, but I do try and stay on top of things. But it would come from, literally a very wide spectrum of sources.
Well, I have one that I would like to recommend to you that has helped me a lot as far as quieting my busy mind, and I actually use it to help me fall asleep at night, and that's an app called Calm. And there's another one called Headspace, but both of them are really good if you can't shut your mind off at night or anytime during the day, actually. So I'd encourage you to check that one out.
Calm and Headspace. Well, I'm writing them down here, so I certainly will.
Yeah, you could download them on your phone, and then, when you can't turn your busy mind off, it's really good to just check out.
Okay, well, that sounds like a very good idea.
So, Derek, how can people get in touch with you?
People can get in touch with me through crowdoutdoors.com. Or they can get me on email. My own direct email is derekos@crowdoutdoors.com. So DEREKOS @crowdoutdoors.com, and that's all one word, CRUA outdoors.com. So people can feel free to reach out at any time.
And I know from experience that you are very responsive.
Yeah, well, that's part of the problem, probably, Nancy. That's part of the problem.
Believe me, I know. As I said before, it's a blessing and a curse.
It is, and I think it's something. Email is something that the problem with email, right, is when you spend your time replying to emails throughout the day, you tend to be working on somebody else's schedule, and quite often the more responsive you are to emails, the more responsive people expect you to be to emails, and I think that'd be a good thing to kind of allot a certain amount of time maybe in the morning and a certain amount of time again just before you finish off or something like that. But I think it does come to a stage where we should close down the email during the day. Certainly if you have a little bit, if you have a project or a body of work to do, I'm starting to get into the habit of the first thing I do is close the email, because otherwise I just find you reply, and one email turns into 10 emails, and half your morning is gone, and you've actually got nothing of what you wanted to do done, but you've solved other people's problems, so.
And that we'll have to do another podcast all about that, because I can see both sides of the coin on that. So I want to thank you, Derek, for joining me. This has been very, very interesting, and I can think of all kinds of people, who are part of PR Maven Nation who are going to enjoy listening to you and being inspired by your story. So I thank you for taking time out of your busy schedule to join us today. And I look forward to continuing the conversation in the future.
Delighted to be here, Nancy. No problem. Great to talk as always.
That's it for this week's episode. I'd like to thank you for listening, and if you feel that you've gotten value out of today's conversation, consider leaving a 5-star review on iTunes or whatever app you're using to tune in. If you haven't subscribed yet, you should do so. I release a new episode each week, and subscribing will make sure you get an alert when there's a new episode. You can also join the PR Maven Nation by going to prmaven.com/nation and clicking join. It's free, and it's a great community of like-minded individuals who are all looking to learn and grow from one another. If you have an Alexa-enabled device, be sure to add the PR Maven Marketing Minute to your daily flash briefing menu. Thanks again for listening, and have a great rest of your week, PR Maven Nation.